explain. Does any one of you know the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Can you show me? Anyone? One nerd? A couple of you? Yes. So it's originally, it's not a book. This is the first edition of the book from 1979, and I'm a proud owner of exactly this edition of the book. It looks already a bit old and yellowish, but it's the first edition. But before the book, they had the BBC radio series, and they published this now, so in case you're interested, on the BBC website, they have the original radio series from the 70s, so this is where it all started, just in case you're interested. So the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is a story about Arthur Dent, and Arthur Dent had some problems because aliens destroyed the Earth and rescued him, so he was basically the last human being, and with the aliens he was traveling the galaxy. So there were a lot of new things to digest for Arthur Dent, and I thought this is a good metaphor for SAP software, because there's lots of new things and even new naming and so on, a lot to digest, and maybe I can give a quick overview of what is relevant in the scope of Fiori development and Fiori tools. So let's get started. Here we go. So where do we start? We can start with technologies. We can start with feature lists and lots of complex functions and so on. And I think we at SAP are very good in providing lots of complex functions, maybe in the classical GUI transactions. But what happens if we think about user experience? If we start with a person to use applications, to have a better user experience, to have a role-based, personalized experience, and not these very complex classical transactions with tons of functionality and you can't really use it. And I think with SAP Fiori we made some very good progress in that area. You see here a bit the evolution of Fiori. So we started quite a while ago, started with very simple scenarios and then went to more complex. And this is going on. So the evolution of Fiori, SAP's design system, is going on. And we are looking at the very right, you see that at aspects, for example, consistency, right? So how can we bring a consistent user experience to SAP's applications? And not just within one application or within one solution like SAP S/4HANA, but also across the SAP portfolio to have a consistent user experience. And user experience is how the applications run, how you interact with them, but it's also the look and feel, obviously. For example, the theme, the colors, how the buttons look like, whether they have rounded corners and so on. And the latest evolution in Fiori design is the horizon theme. So this is what you can switch on as an end user to have fresh new colors. There's a light version called Morning Horizon, a dark version, which you obviously need nowadays, called Evening Horizon, and accessibility versions, high contrast, black and white. And this is a fairly new thing available. And using UI technologies like SAP UI5, for example, we can bring this new theme easily into all the applications because we have a centralized generic technology which is used by many applications, so the theme is available. And if you like to know more details, I have a couple of links here to follow up with. Again, this is a character from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. This is Marvin. Marvin, the paranoid android. Marvin has the brain the size of a planet, so he's very smart, but he always gets very stupid tasks like open the door and things like that. So Marvin is very frustrated and depressed and is complaining all the time. But here with us, he's pointing us to a couple of links, so in case you need to, you want to follow up and get some more information. So here's some more information on the Fiori design guidelines, for example, and the availability of the Horizon theme in the various products, in the SAP UI5 technologies, on BTP, or even in the UI theme designer, where you can create your own custom theme based on Horizon. So, what technologies and tools do we have? I put here this label teaching concept on top, because what we're going to see here is probably not correct. It's not complete, not correct, and it's just a way which I thought is good to give you an overview, right? So don't take this for a complete picture of SAP offerings or so. So what is needed in this context? You would develop an application, or you might adapt an existing application, have a standard application from SAP and adapt it to your need, extend it to your need. And once you have the application, of course, you would use it. And who's doing this? Developer is developing an application. Then the key user, what we call, there are many different terms, you can call this a business expert. This is someone who has a certain technical understanding, maybe writing Excel macros or so, but is not a developer and is not working in code. So this key user will be able to adapt applications. We'll see that in a minute. And of course, the business user is using the application. And what kind of experience do these different types of people have? Looking more into detail, and again, this will be come in a couple of minutes, a developer. We see a pro-code developer using various different tools, working heavily in coding. And we see a citizen developer, again, this has many different names, but a developer who benefits from visual tools, from templates, from wizards, and might even use low-code or no-code approaches to build applications, and we'll see that. And the business user would either work in web, for example, Fiori web applications built with SAP UI5, or mobile, typically with native mobile experiences with iOS and Android. And then they typically have a backend with the business data. Here is only on-prem, but there's of course more backends on BTP and so on. So this is just to give you a frame of where we are. And what we do, the business user in the web would need to launch applications. So we have entry points to do that, and we'll talk about that. For example, the SAP Workzone and SAP Fiori Launchpad. So these are entry points for the business user to call up applications. To build applications, we have various different tools. You can see here both are on business technology platform. So even if you're, for example, developing Fiori apps for your on-prem systems, it's happening in cloud on BTP. And we're looking into details in a second. And we'll look into Business Application Studio, AppGyver, and native mobile technologies. And if you don't want to develop on cloud, but you're maybe a pro-code developer and you want to do it on your local machine, then there's offerings also in Visual Studio Code, for example, or the ABAP development tools in Eclipse, right? So this is the development side on the left. Now, to adapt applications depends a bit on the technology. If we have classical applications, WebDynfo, Floor Plan Manager applications, we have SAP personas to adapt this. So I made this box here right in the fitting to the user role. So a key user person would use sub-screen personas to adapt these classical applications, and we have SAP UI5 flexibility being used by developers, key users, and business users, right, to adapt UI5 apps, and we're going to see that. And mobile, to launch mobile applications, we have SAP Mobile Start. So this is basically the agenda of my talk. So let's start with calling business applications in web, looking at Workzone and SAP Fiori Launchpad. So we need to call up applications, and there's various different solutions in SAP, some homegrown, some acquired, and they have different experiences. They also have different experiences for launching applications. So they have all that individual homepage, and of course we want to strive for consistency. With the Fiori design concept, with the Horizon theme, for example, and other aspects, we want to have a consistent experience. So this is what is mentioned here. And of course, integration is an important aspect if we not only launch applications within one system, but across many systems, on-prem, cloud, and so on, to integrate them into a central launchpad, central entry point. So there's different offerings within one solution, let's say S/4HANA on-prem, to use this stand-alone, so to speak, that you can launch applications of that solution. And we're also providing central entry points which run on BTP, on cloud, where you can connect different systems, so you can launch application from different systems. So you see a consolidated or a federated view. And there's two approaches. One is the classical launchpad. Probably many of you already know this. So you have individual tiles here to launch your Fiori applications. You have cards with more information, with analytical information, for example. This is personalizable, this is role-based, so a structured view to launch applications. And if you need more, if you need, for example, collaboration, or if you need unstructured data, then SAP WorkZone is the right solution. SAP WorkZone can also launch individual applications, but on top has collaboration features, a bit like Portal, unstructured data, and so on. So these are the offerings to build entry points. And of course, there's admin tools for this to define what your end users are going to see, role-based, and so on. This is one example how this would look like with the Horizon theme. You see these cards here, also implemented with UI5. So again, it's a generic technology, and they can be reused, and they are already reused in different solutions. So you see the same cards in different solutions, meaning you have a consistent experience, not just with the Horizon theme, but also with the individual elements on the screen. Again, Marvin shows us here some important links if you want to see a video here on this, or check about the deployment options for those front-end deployments. Okay, SAP UI5. It's the web technology. It's for creating cross-platform applications. So we have UI5 not only in S/4HANA or BTP, but in many SAP solutions, SuccessFactors, Ariba, and so on, we have UI5. So we are able to build the same UI elements, cards, and so on to provide this consistent experience. And it's for enterprise-grade applications. Yes, there are other UI technologies. There are technologies maybe which are easier to learn, or young people coming from university already know them. But working in an SAP context typically requires that you fulfill certain criteria, that you look at security, accessibility, that you can translate your application. There's customers, if you pick a date in an application, you can enter your date. And you have this little calendar control to pick your date, to click to the next month and next year and so on. And there are some customers who need an Islamic calendar, or the Japanese emperor calendar. And all these things you probably take for granted from SAP. These are built in here. And in other UI technologies, you have to create this from scratch. There's a number of qualities here from SAP UI5, what SAP UI5 brings. If you're interested, there's also a video here. So if you want to convince someone that SAP UI5 is a good thing, then have a look at this video here. And UI5 is used in many products here. There's just some numbers here, how many customers use applications built with SAP UI5, how many users, how many SAP solutions. We are closely working with the design departments in SAP, obviously, to come up with a Fiori design, with partners, with the open source community making contributions. So there's a lot of feedback we get from these solutions, and we're putting this into UI5, into the framework, and then all of them benefit from this. So it's the strategic web technology we have at SAP. One aspect is web components, and this is gaining more and more relevance lately. So you might have heard of SAP UI5, so the framework, which exists for, I think it's even 10 years by now. This is working if you are full on an SAP stack like SAP S/4HANA, so you have the full Fiori technologies and gateway and OData and everything. For those solutions in SAP or even outside SAP who don't have this technology stack, who are maybe built on React or Angular, how can they provide this Fiori experience, right? How can they provide a UI which fits into this suite of applications and a consistent UI with qualities like accessibility, security, and so on. And this is where we see web components. Web components is the standard in all modern browsers, basically to define a custom HTML tag to bring up a visual element on the screen. If you use native HTML, you get a native HTML page, which does not look like Fiori. It looks very basic and does not have the UI5 qualities. Now, if we use UI5 web components in HTML, we get a screen with the qualities, with the horizon theme in this case, which is secure, which can use an accessible high contrast black or white screen, and so on, lots of other capabilities. And we do this just in HTML, right? This is no change in underlying NetWeaver or whatever. This is just in HTML. So other technical frameworks like Angular or React can stay in place. You can stay in this application model and your developers can continue use it. But this is a 1 hour or 50 minutes demo of the low-code features in Business Application Studio. And it's really impressive. It's showing you how to, maybe I can quickly show this here. See if this works. So this is Business Application Studio in the low-code perspective. It's taking a second to come up. And you're going to see the home page. And from the home page, you can create a new project, a new application. But you can do this purely with visual tools. You can create a data model defining your entities with your properties. You can add test data, either connected to a data source. Where are we? Here. So creating a data model. You can enter mock data, so you can run your applications. You can expose the data as a service. You can create a UI based on Fiori elements, because then you don't have to create coding, as I explained earlier. And you can test the application and, for example, deploy the application and so on. And all these are visual tools, right? I don't have enough time to show you. Really creating the entities, properties, enter data, use Fiori elements to create the UI. It's all visual tools. So if you watch this demo, there's no coding. And behind the scenes, there is coding, obviously. There is UI5 coding, there's Fiori elements, there's CDS, there's the cloud application programming model, and so on. So everything is here behind the scenes. And if you, in one point in time, say, okay, these visual tools are not enough anymore. I need to go to pro code. I need to go to coding. You can switch here and go to the normal pro code perspective in Application Studio and work with UI5 coding and work with JavaScript coding and work with the CDS views and everything, right? So you have both options. You can start with low code, be very efficient, very productive, and if it's not sufficient anymore, go to the usual Fiori technologies and develop them as you know from Application Studio or Web IDE, for example. So I can really say this is very impressive, and I linked the video here. If you're interested, have a look at this. I find this very impressive and powerful. The various tools for building Fiori. There's other scenarios in applications, in Business Application Studio for building cloud application, for building mobile applications, but here we're looking at Fiori. And there's various tools to develop Fiori applications. To start from a template, visual tools to understand the structure of the application, guided help which put in little code snippets with help of documentation, coding, mock data, and so on. All these tools we call SAP Fiori tools to develop Fiori elements or UI5 Freestyle. And most of them are available in Business Application Studio on cloud, as well as in a local Visual Studio Code. Right? There are two exceptions. One is the layout editor you might know from a Web IDE, where you can drag and drop controls to build your XML view layout. And also the adaptation projects, we talk about them in a second. They are not yet available in Visual Studio Code. But the general idea is provide all the tools, have them available in Application Studio on cloud, if this is the environment you're working with, and have the same tools also available for a local installation in your local Visual Studio Code. This is the general approach. And again, a couple of links, tutorials I recommend. If you're new to Application Studio, the first tutorial is good to get your first steps in Application Studio. To develop this list report object page Fiori elements application, I can recommend the second one. And the third one is for low-code development. So what I just recommended this video, there's a tutorial here for this as well. So there are many more tutorials, but these I would recommend. And for mobile, we have the respective tooling as well. So this is also not new, just for completeness. For native iOS and Android development, we have the respective SDKs, so you can use them in the respective native development environment. And we have the mobile development kit MDK. It's a bit like the Fiori elements approach. Based on metadata, you can generate your application, right? So you're creating some metadata in Application Studio and generate from this your iOS, your native iOS app, your native Android app, or even a native web app with usage of UI5 web components, right? This is a perfect use case for that. So for freestyle development, you have the SDKs, and for pattern-based metadata-driven development, you have the mobile MDK. Again, our overview for the local development tools on your local machine. I mentioned probably most of this. For ABAP development, it's the ABAP development tools in Eclipse. So who of you is using ABAP development tools in Eclipse? Okay, many of you. So this stays in Eclipse. I often get the question, will there be ABAP development in Application Studio? No. No plans. I'm not aware of any plans within SAP. So if it's ABAP development, it's in Eclipse. And for all other use cases, it's Application Studio. Other use cases are cloud, mobile, Fiori, and probably more. And again, as I mentioned, Application Studio, you can use most tools in a local Visual Studio Code or on cloud, pre-configured, ready to go in Business Application Studio on BTP. And by the way, they are also planning a local version of BTP. So you might be familiar with Web IDE Personal Edition to install Web IDE on your local machine. And the same is planned for Application Studio, I think for Q1 next year, in case that is interesting for you. And again, Marvin with entry points if you want to learn more. And now let's have a look at adapting a screen. So there's a standard screen from SAP, and how to use this if it fits 80–90%, but still you want to adapt it to tailor it for your end users, right? You don't want to create your custom application from scratch, but reuse from SAP. You need to find out which applications are available. We have the SAP Fiori Apps Reference Library, very good in naming, which gives a list of all Fiori applications. And I'm just highlighting in this tool, in this list, highlighting two things. I think we are very good at SAP in providing great functionality, but then hide it somewhere. So I'm pointing it out. There's a filter here for the list of applications. And the filter is very good. In the filter, you can use many different criteria. For example, the solutions you have, right? The releases you have. So the list is filtered according to that. And we have extensibility information. So once you pick an application here, you can read about the application, and it says implementation information, and there's a section on extensibility information. So you have really detailed information about the UI application, but also about the back-end service, about the gateway service, about the data structures, and for example, really down to the data dictionary about custom includes in the data dictionary you would need to use then if you extend that. So there's really good information there, but nicely hidden. Now, if you have found an application, you can use that. If you have not found an application, you create your own one. And if you create your own one, you can use the technologies I mentioned before. You can go full freestyle with UI5 because you're using a very different design. Or you can go Fiori elements because you want to stick to the patterns, you want to have maybe a list report and object page. Or go somewhere between in this continuum with the building blocks as I explained. If you reuse from SAP, you have two options. Or not two options, you have there's a decision, what technology is it built on? Is it built with classical UI technologies? Then SAP Screen Personas is the tool to adapt this. If it's SAP UI5, we have UI5 flexibility. Screen Personas, just very brief, offers you many options to work with a classical screen to make this simpler, for example, hiding tabs, changing the theme and so on, to make this look more like Fiori, to make these complex screens I mentioned at the beginning, to make them somehow simpler. So this is one tool for the classical screens. And SAP UI5 flexibility I want to show you. I hope my internet is fine. Scenario is extending standard SAP screens. And here you can see who is doing this. And this is probably an interesting thing. It's not just developers creating extensions. If you're an ABAPer, you know there's bodies, and you would implement a body to extend an application. This is developers, but we also see key users and end users to do changes to standard applications from SAP. And let me quickly show this. So we have an application here. This is listing products. Right, let me make this. I'm not sure if you can read this from the back. Can you read this okay from the back, the font size? Yes? Okay, so you have this application, and as an end user, you might want to filter this. There's TVs, there's computers here. Maybe I just want to see TVs because I want to work with TV products only. So I can put in a filter, TVs. And I see TVs only. Okay. And now I can save this filter here, this view as it's called. Save as, and I call this TVs. And it should be applied automatically. And save. So this is my TVs view. I can have the standard view, so I can see all products, or I can have TVs and I see TVs only. This is not crazy functionality, but it's very useful if you want to create these things for yourself. There's other options to work with the screen, just for yourself. That was the end user on my screen, but we also see the key user. Again, a key user is a person who has some understanding, has some technical understanding, and knows how the end users work. So the key user might want to take a standard screen from SAP, change it to make it fit better for a group of end users. Right? Maybe role-based, for example, or a team. So a key user wants to do changes so that a group of end users can work more efficiently, get a tailored app. Imagine this application. This is the standard SAP application. And I, as a key user, I have a specific authorization making me a key user, so I have the option Adapt UI. Right? So I change this. You see the mouse pointer is a, what's this called? A drag and drop mouse pointer. And maybe I know my end users, they need the description. This field is very important for my end users. So I move it to the top. Drag and drop, I move it to the top. But my end users don't use the terminology description. They call it, let's say, text. So I can rename this. They call it text. This is the language they use. The average rating here, they don't need that. It's too complex. I want to simplify the screen. I can remove this field. Remove. Okay, so you've seen I have done a couple of, sorry, my mouse pointer is always sliding down the table here. So I've done a couple of changes here with drag and drop only. I did not have to call IT, start a development project. I did these changes on my own. I can do more. I can include new fields which are in the gateway service and I think a list of 30 other changes here. Can do those changes, provided, for example, role-based to my end users without having to code. If the changes required are more serious, so you need to code, then we have the adaptation projects. And let me quickly show that. Okay. So this is taking a while. Maybe I can show you in a second. So just like you might know from Web IDE, where you created extension projects, you're taking a standard app as a basis and creating an extension project with your extensions to it, and it's referring the standard. So when you launch the extension project, it launches the standard app and provides some additions, like implemented bodies in ABAP, right? And here, with SAP UI5 flexibility, we have more options here. With the adaptation projects, they are the new, improved version of extension projects. You can work with freestyle UI5 as well as Fiori elements. And there's no need for extension points anymore. Because in the past, we always got feedback, we can't use the extensibility mechanisms because we don't have enough extension points. Compare the bodies in ABAP. Because these need to be predefined by an SAP application developer. Put into every application, maybe someone would want to extend an application here in this place, so I put in an extension point. And if these are not there, not enough, not in the right place, then there's a problem. But with SAP UI5 flexibility, there's no need for extension points. It's a generic technology working just because it's UI5. So you can do extensions, put in your custom coding for a little extra custom button, for an event handler in the controller and things like that. But there's no prerequisite, except a certain UI5 release, no coding prerequisites in the application. And this is a big step forward, I think. Again, a couple of links here to follow up. And native mobile, so start page. So at the beginning we were looking at starting applications from web, and now we're going back, starting applications on mobile. And we have the SAP Mobile Start tool. So unlike other solutions we had before at SAP for starting applications on mobile screens, this is a native start page, right? It's not a separate web page running on your mobile phone. It's native, and it integrates into the native, mechanisms on your mobile phone. For example, the widgets in iOS and so on. So you have the full native integration, and you can launch the native, and notifications, for example, and lots of other things. And you can launch applications there. And we have that for Android, for iOS, and of course a roadmap for next year. And more information for that. Yes, I think we covered all aspects here. And thank you very much. In case you're interested in a more detailed version, there's a recorded version of this session, a 2-hour version, in case you want to follow up and hear this again. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. I'm not sure if we have time for questions, or so we have time for questions. Any question? Are you going to read the Hitchhiker's Guide? Listen to the radio series? Yes?